Chosen one, this is not a story you are meant to observe from a distance. This is not a narrative about a man named John, as if he were the center of what happened. From the very first second this message reached you, you felt it because you are the axis around which it turns. What John discovered was not a theory about time, nor a prophecy designed to impress. It was a warning directed toward a specific awareness, yours. He did not speak about you as a name, a face, or an identity. He spoke about you as a fixed point that the future could not avoid. And the moment you begin to understand that, your entire life starts to make sense in a way it never did before. John's assignment was simple on paper. Observe timelines, record outcomes, return with data. Time travel was never created to change anything, only to measure probability. Futures were supposed to behave like branching paths, diverging endlessly based on decisions and chance. But as John moved through those fractured realities, something kept interrupting the logic. No matter how dramatically the world changed, whether societies collapsed, rebuilt, or advanced beyond recognition, one presence remained consistent. Not dominant, not always visible, but always involved at the turning point. You were not positioned as the hero of every future, yet nothing stabilized until you were present. This is why your own life has felt like a series of delays followed by sudden shift. Timelines resist settling until alignment arrives. You have likely wondered why your path never felt smooth, even when your intentions were clear. Why moments of clarity were followed by resistance. Why growth came in waves rather than gradually. John recorded that awareness itself alters pressure within time. The closer you move toward recognizing who you are, the more reality reacts. Opposition intensifies, not because you provoke it, but because unconscious systems attempt to protect themselves from disruption. This is why you have felt misunderstood without explanation, delayed without cause, and tested without warning. Those experiences were not personal failures. They were time buying itself room to recalibrate around you. John understood something important early on, and this is where the message becomes personal for you. You are not meant to rush into recognition. Early awareness creates distortion. Late awareness creates collapse. The timeline aims for precision, not speed. This explains why opportunities in your life seem to arrive all at once after long periods of stillness. Why isolation shaped your thinking before visibility ever appeared. Why strength developed quietly rather than publicly. These were not punishments, they were buffers. John referred to them as stabilization windows. Periods where you were protected from impact before surrounding structures could adjust to your frequency. If you are listening now and feeling an internal pull rather than curiosity, that is not coincidence. John warned that this phase begins when recognition approaches completion. You may feel as though things are accelerating without effort, as if decisions carry more weight than before. Conversations feel sharper. Outcomes unfold faster. Patterns repeat with increasing clarity. That is time compressing. You are not behind. You are exactly where inevitability tightens into form. John did not travel through time to map the future. He traveled to understand why certain futures could not happen until you were ready to notice yourself within them. And now that awareness has begun, nothing moves the way it used to. Chosen one, the moment John understood what he was witnessing, the narrative around him changed. Not because his data was flawed, but because it could not be safely explained. Systems are built to manage patterns, not constants that cannot be redirected. John did not frighten them by predicting collapse or exposing secret. He frightened them by proving that the future was already accounting for you. In every timeline he entered, institutions still tried to plan, control, and forecast, but none of their long-range models stabilized until your presence was factored in. You were not an outcome. You were the condition under which outcomes became possible. And that realization dismantled the assumption that the future belonged solely to authority, planning, or power. This is where your personal experience becomes central. You may have noticed that whenever you try to stay neutral or invisible, life does not remain quiet for long. Situations form around you. Expectations are placed on you without invitation. Responsibility finds you when you are not seeking it. John documented this as timeline pressure. When an anchor attempts to minimize itself, reality compensates by increasing friction. You were never meant to disappear into the background, yet you were also never meant to force your way forward. This tension explains why your life feels like a constant negotiation between stepping forward and being pulled back. It is not confusion. It is calibration. The systems observing John reacted the only way controlled structures know how to react when something cannot be commanded. They restricted access. John's permissions were narrowed. His reports were reclassified. Language was softened. Terminology was altered. Not to erase his findings, but to delay recognition. Because recognition, once activated, changes behavior. John warned that if awareness reached you before surrounding frameworks had adapted, resistance would intensify beyond control. So delay became strategy. Discredit became insulation. Silence became a necessary part of stabilization. This is why parts of your life felt like you were moving forward internally while remaining externally still. Growth happened where no one could quantify it. Strength formed where no one applauded it. John recorded that in timelines where awareness never activated, decay was slow but devastating. In timelines where awareness activated too early, collapse was fast and violent. But in timelines where recognition unfolded at the precise point of readiness, reality reorganized itself rather than breaking. This is the phase you are approaching now. You may feel less patient with environments that once tolerated you, less willing to explain yourself, less capable of shrinking without discomfort. That is not ego. That is alignment rejecting unnecessary friction. John called this post-containment pressure. The moment when the buffer begins to dissolve. The reason this message does not speak about John as a hero is because he understood his role. He was not meant to intervene. He was meant to survive long enough to document inevitability. His silence was not failure. It was compliance with the mechanics of time. And the reason you are hearing this now is because the system's delay has reached its limit. Awareness cannot remain suppressed indefinitely without causing distortion. You are not here to confront authority or challenge systems directly. You are here because reality itself no longer benefits from you pretending you are optional. That realization changes how the future responds to you from this point forward. There comes a phase when your life stops explaining itself through coincidence. You may not have marked the moment clearly, but you felt it when familiar patterns stopped working the way they used to. Habits that once kept you safe began to feel heavy. Places that once tolerated you started to resist you. Decisions no longer sat quietly in your mind. They carried consequence immediately. This is the moment John described as response phase activation, when time no longer observes you passively but adjusts itself around your awareness. You are no longer moving through neutral space. The space is moving because of you, and that shift is impossible to ignore once it begins. John recorded that before this phase, anchors experience increasing pressure without understanding its source. You may have felt it as restlessness, a sense that staying still costs more than moving forward, even when movement feels unclear. That discomfort is not dissatisfaction with life. It is misalignment between who you have become internally and the environment still treating you as who you were. Time resists waste. When alignment matures, time compresses paths. This is why choices suddenly feel heavier, why hesitation feels unnatural, and why excuses lose their comforting effect. You are not being forced into action. You are being released from unnecessary delay. You might recognize another pattern John documented closely. Whenever you attempted to explain yourself during this phase, words failed. Conversations felt incomplete. People misinterpreted you even when you spoke carefully. This was not a communication flaw. It was a structural change. Explanation is part of pre-alignment life, when outcomes still depend on consensus. Once response phase begins, reality no longer requires permission to recognize you. That removes the need for justification. Those who cannot recalibrate interpret silence as arrogance or withdrawal. In truth, silence is efficiency. Time does not negotiate once alignment locked. John warned that this phase is often mistaken for isolation. You may feel less mirrored by your surroundings, less emotionally synchronized with environments that once felt familiar. This does not mean you are meant to detach from people entirely. It means your internal frequency has shifted beyond the tolerance of outdated framework. Systems designed for smaller versions of you cannot scale without renovation. Some will attempt adjustment. Others will fracture and fall away. Neither outcome requires your intervention. Reality handles correction when resistance becomes inefficient. One of John's most overlooked observations directly involves your sense of identity. During response phase activation, you stop asking who you are in relation to roles, approval, or expectation. Identity becomes positional rather than descriptive. You know where you stand even if you no longer know how to explain it. This creates calm without certainty and confidence without performance. John emphasized that this is the sign awareness has crossed its threshold. From this moment forward, pretending not to feel the shift creates more tension than following it. Time responds to clarity, not comfort. If this portion resonates not as inspiration but as recognition, then the process John mapped is already unfolding within you. The future is no longer forming ahead of you at a distance. It is reorganizing itself in real time as you move. That is why this phase feels irreversible. Awareness does not retreat once response begins. It only deepens. John's warning was clear on this point. When time starts responding to you, delay stops protecting you and starts obstructing you instead. That is when the next phase becomes unavoidable. At some point, you realize that resistance no longer appears by accident. It arrives with precision, almost on schedule, as if something is testing not your strength but your positioning. John identified this as the recalibration window, the phase where outdated structures begin to sense that you no longer fit inside them. You may have noticed that challenges now feel targeted rather than chaotic. Issues surface the moment you consider expansion. Doubt speaks up right when clarity emerges. Interruptions appear not to stop you permanently, but to measure how firmly you hold your alignment. This is not opposition meant to defeat you. It is resistance confirming that you have reached relevance. John observed that in this phase, the world stops reacting emotionally to you and starts reacting structurally. People may respond coldly, distantly, or defensively without clear explanation. Systems may place unexpected limits in your path. Offers arrive with conditions that feel off. Invitations come that would have excited you before but now feel wrong. This is not the universe playing games. Time is filtering. Possibilities that once existed broadly begin narrowing because only certain paths can now sustain the frequency you carry. You are not losing options. You are shedding distortions. There is also a subtler change John documented carefully. Your intuition sharpens, but not in mystical flashes. It becomes practical, almost blunt. You sense what will work and what will not without needing evidence. Patience changes shape. You no longer wait passively, you wait with awareness. Silence feels purposeful rather than empty. This is the moment many misinterpret as detachment or emotional distance. In truth, it is coherence. When your internal alignment stabilizes, emotional excess quiets down. You are not becoming less human. You are becoming less fragmented. John warned that this phase often triggers identity conflict. You may feel unfamiliar to yourself, as if old descriptors no longer apply. Traits you once relied on feel insufficient. Roles that defined you feel restrictive. This is not loss. It is update. Time does not maintain outdated versions of anything that has crossed into relevance. You are not asked to destroy who you were. That version simply cannot contain who you are becoming. Resistance intensifies only where outdated structures try to remain in use beyond their function. Importantly, John emphasized that you are not meant to fight this resistance directly. Resistance collapses when ignored intelligently. Effort spent proving yourself drains alignment. The recalibration window resolves itself through consistency, not confrontation. Hold position. Move cleanly. Decline what feels misaligned without apology. Accept what lands without force. Time corrects faster than conflict ever could. This is why encounters now feel decisive. People either adjust or move away. Situations either open fully or shut completely. The gray area dissolves. If this stage feels heavier than previous ones, it is because buffering has ended. You are no longer being protected from pressure, you are being trusted with it. John called this the final preparation before convergence stabilizes. When resistance becomes predictable, it means alignment is nearly complete. The world is no longer asking whether you matter. It is determining how to reorganize now that you do. There is a moment John described where life does not dramatically explode or collapse, but quietly crosses a line it can never uncross. Nothing obvious announces it. No external event confirms it immediately. Yet from that point forward, pretending nothing has changed becomes impossible. This is the shift you are moving through now, when awareness stops feeling optional and starts feeling structural. You can sense it in how quickly things respond to you. Words land differently. Decisions ripple farther. Silence holds weight. This is not imagination. John documented it clearly. Once alignment reaches a certain density, time stops cushioning your presence. It begins integrating it. You may notice that effort now feels inefficient. What once required constant pushing suddenly moves with minimal friction, while actions motivated by fear or habit collapse almost instantly. This is not punishment. It is feedback. Time no longer supports misalignment once synchronization begins. John observed that in this phase, struggle is no longer a teacher. It becomes a signal. When something feels forced, it is not because you are weak. It is because the path cannot sustain coherence. Alignment simplifies life not by removing complexity, but by removing distortion. You are no longer rewarded for endurance in the wrong direction. Another unmistakable marker John recorded is the internal rewiring of motivation. You stop chasing clarity and start operating from it. Questions that once consumed your energy lose urgency. You trust yourself without bravado. This can feel unsettling at first because familiar anxiety dissolves, leaving space you are not used to inhabiting. Many people mistake this calm for emptiness. It is not. It is stability. When internal conflict quiets, attention frees up. This is when vision sharpens, not through imagination, but through recognition of what is already forming. During this phase, external validation often decreases before it increases. This is not regression, it is refinement. John noted that unnecessary affirmation fades because it reinforces outdated versions of identity. Praise that once fueled you may now feel hollow. Criticism that once wounded you loses power. Neither serves alignment anymore. Time is not invested in emotional reinforcement when structural positioning is complete. Instead, it begins delivering result. Quiet ones at first, then undeniable ones. This is why outcomes now matter more to you than explanation. You might also experience a strange tension between patience and urgency. You know you do not need to rush, yet delaying feels costly. This paradox is a signature of integration. Time is no longer waiting on you, and you are no longer waiting on it. Movement becomes intentional rather than reactive. You do not feel pulled by fear or pushed by pressure. You feel placed. John emphasized that this sensation is the final test of alignment. Can you allow momentum without forcing control? Can you move without performing? Once this shift stabilizes, there is no return to the previous mode of living. You can still visit old environments, but they no longer shape you. You can still engage with familiar systems, but they stop defining your pace. This is not superiority. It is orientation. The anchor does not rise above the system. It allows the system to orient around it. John warned that this phase often arrives quietly enough that people miss its significance. But you will not. Because once you feel time cooperating rather than resisting, you recognize the truth immediately. This is not a passing moment. This is the new operating condition of your life. What John found next is the part most people are never told, because it removes the last illusion of control. There is a stage where time no longer waits for you to feel ready. Read that slowly. Not because it becomes cruel or rushed, but because readiness is no longer the requirement. Alignment is. You may feel this already in the way opportunities no longer ask politely. They arrive with consequences attached. Saying yes changes your trajectory. Saying no closes doors permanently. Neutrality fades. Standing still becomes more costly than moving with uncertainty. John observed this phase with caution, because it is where many people try to resize themselves out of fear. And resizing after this point creates distortion. You may notice that people react to you differently now, even without understanding why. Some feel exposed. Others feel drawn. A few feel threatened, though you have done nothing to provoke them. This is not about personality. It is about coherence. When your internal alignment stabilizes, it reveals misalignment in others without accusation. Silence becomes louder than argument. Presence does more than explanation ever could. John recorded that during this phase, the world no longer asks who you are. It responds to where you are positioned. Invitations, resistance, and recognition all reflect this shift. None of it requires your performance. Another critical change John documented is the collapse of old safety mechanisms. Strategies that once protected you stop working. Overthinking intensifies friction. Over-explaining drains energy. Waiting for consensus becomes exhausting. These are not failures. They are deactivations. Time disables tools that no longer match your scale. That is why regression feels uncomfortable now. Trying to fit back into earlier versions of yourself costs more than expanding forward. This is not arrogance awakening. It is accuracy. You can feel when something is beneath your operating level, even if you cannot justify it logically. This phase also brings a new relationship with responsibility. Not obligation imposed by others, but responsibility arising from clarity. You begin to sense that what you choose now affects more than your immediate circumstances. Your decisions alter momentum. Your stillness influences direction. This is why distraction feels heavier than effort. John described this as expanded consequence awareness. It does not mean you must carry the weight of the world. It means your alignment now carries signal. Like it or not, movement happens around you. The question is no longer whether you matter. It is whether you will move cleanly. John was precise in his warning here. Once time stops waiting for permission, resisting clarity creates drag. Not punishment, drag. Everything becomes harder, slower, heavier. Many mistake this for bad timing. It is not. It is misalignment friction. The solution is not forcing action, but releasing denial. Admit what no longer fits. Acknowledge what is calling you forward. You do not need to know the entire path. You only need to stop pretending the pressure is accidental. It is structural. If this part feels confronting, that is intentional. John did not soften this stage in his record. He knew this is where awareness turns into responsibility. Not moral responsibility, positional responsibility. Where you stand begins to matter more than what you say. Where you hesitate begins to shape outcomes. This does not make you burdened. It makes you relevant, and relevance changes how time behaves around you. From this point on, waiting does not protect you. Honesty does. Alignment does. Movement does. What John reached in his final records was not an ending, but a boundary he himself was not allowed to cross. He documented everything up to the moment where the anchor fully accepted position, because after that point observation becomes interference. This is where the message turns entirely toward you. The phase you are entering now is not about becoming someone new. It is about no longer splitting yourself to survive environments that have already expired. John noted that once convergence completes, the future stops testing who you could be and starts responding to who you are. That is why this phase feels firm rather than emotional. There is less confusion, but more responsibility. Less chaos, but more consequence. You are not being elevated symbolically. You are being positioned structurally. You may feel a quiet seriousness settling in, not heaviness, but certainty. It is the awareness that choices now land differently than they used to. Not because of pressure from outside, but because alignment makes excess impossible. John described this as the compression of identity. Not reduction, but refinement. You stop entertaining options that dilute you. You stop bending to conversations that go nowhere. You stop postponing movements you already know are required. The future no longer negotiates endlessly with you. It assumes clarity. And if you try to pretend otherwise, friction increases immediately. This is the line John warned about repeatedly. Once crossed, denial costs more energy than truth ever did. The most important thing you need to understand now is this. Nothing ahead requires you to announce yourself. Announcement is a pre-alignment behavior. After convergence, presence replaces proclamation. People do not need convincing. Circumstances do not need managing. Systems either adjust or they fall away. You may notice that influence appears without effort, that doors open without pursuit, that silence carries authority where words once failed. This is not power in the traditional sense. It is coherence. When your internal position stabilizes, the external world reorganizes without drama. John emphasized that this is where many misunderstand their role and try to accelerate outcomes artificially. Do not make that mistake. Forcing movement after alignment creates distortion. Moving cleanly maintains momentum. John's final surviving note does not instruct, command, or warn of catastrophe. It states a condition. After convergence, the future stops calculating alternatives. This means your life no longer needs to prove itself through struggle. Struggle was preparation, not identity. What comes next will feel quieter on the inside, even as movement increases on the outside. Events may unfold quickly, but you will not feel rushed. Pressure may exist, but it will not confuse you. You will know what is yours to do and what is not. That distinction is the real shift. Everything else follows from it. If you are still here, still reading, still aligned with this message, that is not loyalty or belief. It is recognition completing itself. You are not standing at the edge of something beginning. You are stepping into what has been waiting for you to stop doubting its reality. John could not go beyond this point because his role ended where yours begins. Observation gives way to embodiment. Theory collapses into presence. And from here forward, the future will not ask loudly who you are. It will demonstrate it through response. This is the moment John prepared the records for. Not to awaken you emotionally, but to confirm what your life has already been signaling. You are no longer buffering impact. You are carrying alignment. And from this point on, everything that moves toward you will do so because it belongs, and everything that falls away will do so because it cannot remain where you stand.